Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the MC Events podcast. I'm your host, Joey, co-hosted and joined by Gilan.
Hello.
And today we're joined by bumpyJake for another interview. Welcome to the podcast, bumpyJake.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right.
Nice.
I just got back from a pretty long holiday.
In America,
in the US,
right?
so I'm still. Yeah, I was in Florida for a few weeks, so I'm back now,
Wow.
recovering.
You do need a recovery after this.
Also, you were in Florida in August, which is
Scary.
Yeah, that was the problem.
So obviously, Gil and I are very familiar with you as you've done lots of events over the years. But for people who aren't familiar with you, how would you introduce yourself and what you're known for?
I mean, typically, if people don't know who I am, I just kind of say I make Minecraft things. It's a very niche thing. I feel like I feel like people who see me usually see me from my work, so people will like understand that that's like what I do.
Yeah.
But I make events, I make SMPs, I do projects, I do video editing for creators, I do a whole like host of things in the whole area for a variety of people.
So what are the main things you're kind of working on right now?
Well, I've a few like studios I'm a part of. Obviously, work on Block Wars now. But still will do work for EVNT. I have a couple other smaller studios that I do work for, and then apart from that, it's just a lot of standalone projects, a lot of like creator SMPs that I get brought in to run, and like events that people ask for help with, or like I get commissions to make plugins or edits or whatever. It's like when people ask me that, it's kind of like it's very hard to like just pinpoint this is what I'm doing, because
there's just
on any given day I'll float between like today alone I've worked across like 4 or 5 different projects.
Dang.
In the last like what time is it? Like 8 hours.
That's a lot of things be bounced between. How do you keep it all organized?
I usually don't. Well, I kind of do. I've been getting a bit better as the work's been building up more. I literally just have like a long list of things to do, and I'll just kind of I'll have things that I'll have to prioritize in my mind, because if it's something that's paid versus something that's not paid, or something that has a deadline, I usually know. But then I just end up having a long list of things that just builds up, and then I'll slowly start clearing it out.
For sure, yeah.
More specifically for events, when did you kind of start working on making events? Like, what was the first thing that you worked on in your memory?
The first event, I ran quite a few servers with friends for a bit. The first event I worked on, it was me and a couple friends where we're gonna just make some fun events for like people in our friend group. And like, this is back in like I guess late 2021. Actually, no, it might have been it would have been early 2021. There were nothing special, there were nothing big. It was we had like 20 people or something. And then I started making more public events when I started getting more involved with the community, and I met a couple people who kind of like introduced me and kind of got me started. But I really started being more well known for doing events probably like beginning of 2022. Probably like more so going into 2022, I started to do like more bigger things.
So what were those first kind of events that kind of got your name out there?
I did it was a community, the Discord that I was a moderator in like a late 2021, early 2022. It was just like a community, like a public community Discord for like some person I met on Twitter, and we did a couple like smaller events, and then we had this idea for like a cruise event, or like just like a social event where everyone can just like go hang out and we'll do like games on this cruise ship. And yeah, I had like 90 players on that or something, and that was the first event where I like was like a bigger event. And then after that I kind of started like branching out more. I think the way like I really probably started doing a lot more was when I made the Dotwave Pride games in 2022, which was like the first thing I'd done with like bigger creators in it and stuff. And and then like after I joined Dotwave, obviously I was then doing a lot more bigger projects.
Yeah. And so it sounds like you have a variety of different roles when you work on stuff. Like, what are all the things you usually help with on making an event, when making an event?
It's a very large variety. My my skill set is pretty large. So like you'll see me like in various different projects where like I'll be doing like completely different things across them. Like in some projects where like there's like more experienced developers, I'll be like just doing like I'll manage the project, I'll manage the team, I'll do asset management, I'll do testing management. Sometimes I'll do development. Sometimes I'll do marketing or editing. It's very like it's a very like open skill set I have.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of do just work across so many different things.
Which role do you prefer taking on the most?
I don't know. It very much depends on what the project actually is. I've been like when I first started doing events, I didn't know how to code really. I was doing everything in very like janky ways, and then I started to learn more, and I've become a lot like better and more confident in doing that. So it's something I very much do enjoy doing now. However, I do also just I don't know. It very much depends on the project because I like to kind of have my hands in doing everything. Like so on projects, I will often do development and also project management, and also testing management and asset management, and I'll also do the editing. So it's like I don't think there's something I like doing most. I think there's because I end up always doing everything anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I guess.
So because you kind of have that like wider skill set and can kind of wear a lot of different hats, you could say. Do you feel that you end up in leadership roles more often for a lot of these projects, like as you went like in more management and like kind of higher up roles?
Yeah, I often do. Like even if like even if like that's not why I was like intended to be brought on for, if it's like a small standalone event, it's something because like I'm very much somewhere like I'll like see like how an event is being run and I'll be like, well, why don't you just do this? Because I know that this works better. And I think it's just something I end up naturally taking on just because of how many times I've done that kind of role. I often will like, an owner event will like bring me on and I'll like kind of advise them and I'll end up just kind of like taking control a lot more just because it's like, it's just easier for me, I guess, at this point, just because I've done it so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that experience.
So if I were to ask you to list all the events you've worked on the past, 3 years, how many is that going to be?
That is a big question. I mean, I did a thing a little bit ago where I kind of went through like all my little Discord servers and screenshots and everything, and like compiled a list of like every project I'd worked on. So like project being like events and also but also like SMPs and also like edits I'd done, and that was like I think I'm at 150 now.
Jeez.
For the last couple of years. In terms of events, it's kind of hard to nail down. I probably could have gone and counted before this. It's probably like I don't know. It's got to be like I reckon around 50.
Jeez.
Oh, it's something like that. It's quite a lot.
Mm-hmm. And through all of those events, which would you say have been like your favorites or the ones that are like most impactful to you?
I think most impactful would probably be like the charity events I've done. Like I did Pride Games this year again, in June, which was not only it was quite a big event for me personally because Pride Games 2022 was the first event I made before I got hired by Wave. It was quite big for that in that regard, and it was something I like probably put the most energy into over the course of like a month and a half. And like being able to like raise money for like that kind of good cause. I've done quite a few other charity events. There was an event I developed for International Women's Day for a friend back in whatever month that was, I forgot. Which wasn't necessarily like the biggest event. It wasn't like, but like it was like any event where like I can like read people's tweets about and like read people's feedback and like see how much people genuinely enjoyed playing in it will always be like impactful for me in that way, I guess.
And then of those, like, which were your favorite? Like, what event you've worked on has been your favorite? If you're gonna have a favorite out of all of them.
Yeah, it's very hard to nail down a favorite because all the events, a lot of like my best events that I've like enjoyed working on, have all been good. Like, we did the X Games event back in January, which was just purely on the scale and just like it was genuinely a really fun project to work across. Fighter Games was something I really enjoyed just because it was something I like. It was like kind of my event. It was like it was an EVNT event, but like I did basically like I did pretty much everything in that event. Like not everything, but it was like something that a lot of my effort was put into. But it's very hard to have a favorite when I've worked across so many different events that have so many like good parts.
For sure.
But like probably like X Games is pretty good. Fight Games was good. I'm trying to think if there's anything else like immediately comes out to mind, but those are the two that immediately come to mind.
One thing is, because you've mentioned multiple times, and in case people listening or viewing don't understand, so you've mentioned Dotwave and EVNT, which are, I guess, one now. Did Dotwave join EVNT? Is it kind of one team? Did a lot of the people from Dotwave move over?
Yeah, so Dotwave EVNT were two separate things. There were quite a few Dotwave staff that worked at EVNT as well, and Dotwave and EVNT had done a lot of like joint projects before, like the Twitch rival stuff. So then in the beginning of this year, Dotwave merged into EVNT, meaning that like Dotwave kind of ceased to exist, I guess, and all of Dotwave staff then joined EVNT. So it's changed a lot of the stuff that we do there. There's a lot of things have changed, but when I'm doing Minecraft stuff at EVNT, it's pretty much what I was doing at Dotwave. It didn't really change much in that regard, apart from that we have wider access to people and wider access to resources.
Yeah. And so you probably can't tease anything you're currently working on for them. Right? Or can you?
Yeah, I can't. There's not NDAs and all that.
Oh, so sad. But outside of you're working on all your own events, you're part of all these various teams. Are there other events that you watch and things you like take away from watching them?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly don't watch too many events. I just don't really watch streams overall. I obviously like big events like MCC and Block Wars, like really any event that like is a big event. Like if I see anything from it, it's all like I'd always be like subconsciously taking inspiration of like what I could do, and like especially now like being on the Block Wars team and seeing how things are done there. I don't know. It's really there's no like single event where I've been like, oh, like that's good. I'm gonna like take inspiration from that, or like take away like stuff from that. It's just I feel like you kind of like from watching so many different events and so many events that are like the same, you kind of take away like not really like specific like bits of technical knowledge. I kind of end up taking away like, well, I'm trying to think like I feel like one of the biggest things I always take away from watching events is like how similar a lot of events are, and then every time I work on an event, I'm like telling people just don't do that because I've seen that done like 10 times by like these various events. That's probably the biggest takeaway I have. It's just kind of what like things not to do because I've seen this not work, so we probably shouldn't do that either.
And so when you're going into working on an event or making something new or joining with a team, like what's your priority of like your main focus? Is it like focused on the gameplay? Is it focused on ensuring everybody has a good time? Is it focused on helping like the other staff build the best thing possible? And how do you define what the best thing possible is?
I mean, again, it very much depends on what the project is. Like if I'm brought on to like just do a specific thing, then for all the time I'll just stick to doing that thing. Like it's everyone like obviously wants like to make an event where everyone will have a good time, and like that is often what like I kind of have to focus on. But it's also like trying to define like what that is, like what is a good, like what will make these people have a good time. And it's kind of just like again like looking at other events. Like if someone's like, oh well, I want to make this event, I'm like, well, I've seen this event do this similar thing and it didn't really work, so why don't we try this? It's like kind of just a lot of this is what you could do. Like a lot of the time, like I won't, if it's not when I'm leading, I won't tell people you do this. I'm like, well, this is what you could do instead. And I feel like people generally trust me with those kind of opinions just because it's something I've obviously I do so much.
Yeah, that makes sense. You just said it, taking inspiration or seeing what other things have done, which is how do you draw the line between taking inspiration versus copying?
I feel like if you're taking inspiration, I feel like if you there's kind of when it comes to stuff like Minecraft events, it's a very thin line because everyone is same limitations. Like everyone has the same things that they can and can't do. Like any event could do the same thing as another event. I feel like you kind of it very much depends on. It's very difficult, I think, because if an event makes like a Spleef game and I go make a Spleef game in my event, and it's like, oh well, did you copy Spleef? And I'm like, well, no. I felt like copying games. So it's always been a very big point of contention because it's like no, there's not really any original games anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's done every game. I feel like the best way to do it is you just kind of have to like judge it carefully, like judge like, okay, how can I take this thing that I've seen another event do that I like, but modify it to become its own thing. Like if you see a lot of people like drawing lines to like being like, oh well, this is just like this, then it might be that you've done something wrong there.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to rethink how to make it more different.
Because the one Gilan I've often pointed out is how Ace Race from MCC has essentially a variant / twist in every other similar event where Block Wars has race, Pandora's Box has speedrun, others have their own forms of racing games that all feel essentially the same. And we're kind of okay with that. Everyone seems okay with that, no one being called out for it. But for other things, it gets a little iffier of, how do you make it be clearly different when there's only so many mechanics you can use?
Yeah, I think I saw Ace Race is, I think, is a good example there. I think just the MCC format in general is like it's something that's been replicated so many times that like any time an event does something, it's like, well, there's probably another event that's already done it.
Mm-hmm.
Like everyone's done some format of Ace Race, not because everyone's like, oh, I want to copy MCC. It's because it's a fun game, but like there's kind of only so much you can modify it. Like if you want to do a race game, you're going to end up having to put in like a jump pad. If you want to do a race game, you're going to end up having to like put in like an elytra section, because otherwise you're very much limiting yourself by only trying to do what other people haven't done, because that's kind of impossible that like in this kind of area. I feel like I think there was like a Block Wars game that I think it was like Blitz Hunt.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot, like there was a lot of contention around it about like it. I think it was a Pandora's Box game or something.
Mania.
Mania, that was it. Yeah. And it's like, like I know because I see the Block Wars internal channels that like that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a lot of people don't draw that same conclusion, but like you just never really know. But at the end of the day, if there's a game mechanic that someone can make, anyone else can make it, and you're going to end up with similarities. There's just not really like, again, Minecraft is like, while it's a very open space, it's also quite limited when you're making these kind of like mini game events. There's only really so much you can do. Like if you want to have an 8 mini game event, you're never going to be able to come up with 8 completely original mini games, because like there's kind of only so many mini games you can make in Minecraft.
Or I mean the others. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I mean the other side of it is you actually probably could come up with 8 unique mini games, but like nobody's going to like them because they have no comparison of what to do. Like everyone's going to be confused in the event because they've never done it before, and like every single game is unique. And that's one of the things we've talked about with like the racing style games that every event has, is that it's really nice because no matter what you've done as a Minecraft player before, you can like relate to that game and instantly get it. Like within seconds, you're like, oh, this is a game with racing, and here's all these Minecraft mechanics I know how to use. And the only difference is that there's a new map every time, right? So players' skills can transfer over, and that's kind of like that's what makes a lot of those race games interesting, is that people get good at it in general, and then they can go into any event and have that skill.
It's the idea of being good at Minecraft versus good at just one game.
Yeah, but I feel like that also kind of creates a problem when it's like, I mean, I don't know. I feel like it's a good thing, because people being good at one thing means that if they join an event where it's like not an event they've played before, they'll still have some ideas. But I feel like that also translates to anything. Like if you're good at PvP in Minecraft, you're going to be good at any variety of PvP games that are in any event, whether it's Survivor games, or Sky Wars, or whatever it is. I feel like it's like you said, like if you make a game that's like completely original, people are going to be very confused. But then you get to a point where it's like you kind of can't just keep doing the same things over and over again. But like if there's a Minecraft event which I worked on, we first did in November, was the Bicycle Posting Game Master event, which had 4 mini games in it. We ran it. It was good. We ran it a second time in February, I believe. We didn't change a single thing, and then we were looking back at it, and they were like, "What should we do it a third time?" And I basically said to them, "If you do it a third time, people are just going to stop showing up because it's the same thing. You have to change something." Like if MCC had run the exact same event, like 40 times now or whatever it is, like, you know, everyone would have stopped watching. It's like you have to create new features to make new games. You have to innovate at some point. And you know, I think a very big issue is when you're creating something completely original, people won't understand it, and a lot of people won't try to understand it because you know, people show up to an event and they're like, okay, I'm just gonna go and play this event, leave, and that's the only thought I'm gonna have about it, which creates quite a big problem. You kind of like, I've run into this problem quite a lot with events where it's like, well, I have this cool idea, but I need to like dumb it down so people will understand it. Like people who don't want to like watch the update video, people who don't want to watch like read the information I put in the Discord. Like you kind of have to dumb it down, I found, because otherwise people will just like not get it and then not have fun.
Well, it's kind of like the idea with MCC. They know they have consistent players that will come back every event and be willing to try new things because they trust the Noxter who's making it. But if you're trying to like a one-off event, creators or players aren't going to have that same level of trust to like read stuff or pay attention, and they go into it and will very quickly be ready to criticize and say, I don't like this, I don't understand. Because if you look at, Gil and I went back and watched MCC 1 not too long ago. And yes, the presentation's still great. Yes, the games are pretty solid, but 6 of those games are now gone. Like the event was not as fun as then it became to be, but people are willing to, you know, trust and let it be iterated upon and get better. I was going to ask a different question though, I guess, related to games when you're, you know, because you have PvP, you have movement, you have team games at times. How do you deal with team balancing when sometimes if one team's really good, it makes the other teams not really have fun, but it's kind of hard to judge skill too?
I've been kind of lucky in the events I've worked on. It's never something I've really had to do. A lot of the events I've run have been charity events, so it's player management. Sorry, like team balancing isn't really something we pay too much attention to in those. It's very difficult because, you know, everyone wants to be with their friends, but when you're like, if I'm running like a 100-player event, you know, how am I going to be able to put everyone with their friend plus balance, like make sure a team is balanced? Like it's a very hard situation, and at the end of the day, like you're going to end up with teams that are better than other teams. Like there was one of the Pride Games events we did this year. It's Speedrun Bingo again. And, you know, we had very strong teams, and the team that won it was a team that, like, you know, you'd look at that team and think, yeah, obviously that team's going to win. Only because it was like, well, like, we didn't really have the time or the resources to like be able to like properly balance teams, because it's a very big task. So what we ended up with was like people who had fun, and then people who didn't have fun because like, oh, they kept getting killed. So I feel like team balancing is as much a thing as like game balancing, because even if all the teams are balanced, the game itself isn't balanced, and you're gonna have people who aren't having fun because like, oh, like in that event. So like the concept of that event was like you had 10 achievements you had to complete before entering the end in your team, and then beat the game. But you also had to like, there's 100 other players that in this small map that you'd run into, and then you have to kill. And we ran into quite a big issue when I was reading feedback where people were like very split on, should we be able to PvP or should we not? Or like, should PvP just be off? And it's one of those things where people who are good at PvP are going to want it on, people who aren't good at PvP are going to want it off. And I kind of have to look at it from a game perspective where if we didn't have PvP, it wouldn't be as fun. But when we do have PvP, other people don't have fun. I think one of the biggest issues in an event like that is that we've invited 100 people, and every one of those 100 people is so different. They all want such different things in a game. Like when I invite 100 people to Pride games, we got people who want to do PvP, people who want to just like, go play Minecraft normally. Like it's so hard to balance like that kind of thing. I feel like even in like other events, because everyone's there for a different thing, but you can't really just only invite people that want to do PvP, because then it's just boring. So you kind of have to have variety, but then it's just the whole like circle. It just every possible outcome will cause some kind of issue with someone.
Well, especially for events that use something where like if you're killed, you're then out, or if you lose, you're out, then is like making it so a lot of players aren't getting to play. And I know like MCU or Minecraft, or I guess it's MC Ultimate, which is the big Hunger Games one, was like, all right, let's bring the gulag, let's bring ways to revive your teammates. And I know you also did the Squid Game event, right?
No, I didn't do that one.
You didn't do that one.
I was
Never mind.
in it.
You weren't in it.
I was before I really got into the
Yeah,
scene.
yeah. But like the idea of the Squid Game event is the first game is supposed to kill off half the players. So if you have 100 players show up and 50 of them already out within 20 minutes, that's not really a great experience for those 50.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just some things, some events,
Yeah.
and some ideas that we're trying to like incorporate into Minecraft or what into an event format, need to be thought of for every player's perspective and not just like, oh, this sounds like it should be good.
Yeah, I a lot of like when a lot of time when making events, I kind of have to also think in mind like people are going to join this event to make content off of it.
Mm-hmm.
So if they join the event and get like a minute worth of content because they died immediately, then like that doesn't really work. So then like I think like the simplest example would be when I'm running a hide and seek event. Instead of people becoming spectators, they'll just become seekers as well. So that way everyone has consistent content. But then you get into like something like survival games where it's kind of a lot harder to do something like that. So which is why survival games, unless it's a scale like Minecraft Ultimate, doesn't really work standalone.
Mm-hmm.
Like if it's like, okay, this is an event where we're going to play 3 rounds of survival games. Okay, well I died first every single round and had to AFK for about 50 minutes. So it's not good for the player experience and it's not good for the content either.
Yeah.
So if it's a mini game in the context of an 8 mini game event, then I think it's fine because that's kind of expected and it's very fast paced. But otherwise, if it's meant to be a longer form event, you kind of have to find ways where everyone is always like not just like sitting there if they die or if they get out. Like it's, yeah, I don't know. It's again, it's just kind of balancing because everyone wants to get content. You kind of have to like think about that a lot if you're expecting people to make content off of it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Now, on this podcast, we've also talked about other parts of like event making process, and one that we do find very important is testing and like the testing process and changing things due to tester feedback. So how do you like utilize testing and like specifically like pre-event before you've run the event and you just have testers testing stuff? Like how do you use that feedback to change the event?
I mean, a lot of the time, it's a lot of just like, oh, this is a bug that's wrong. I feel like I feel like it's a very like kind of minor example. Like it's just like whenever I run a test, it's always like you get like a few bits of feedback related to game design, and you get like 20 bits of feedback related to like, oh, you spelt this word wrong in this chat message. Mm-hmm. What I saw a lot when we're testing for Pride games is, you can like spend ages like in VC like and like with a group of people like designing a game and writing documents and then developing it, but you won't ever really gauge like how well a game plays until you test it. Like when we were testing for Pride games, like immediately, like just from playing it with a full roster of people, we can tell like, oh, this is immediately something that just doesn't work as a gameplay element. So it's a lot of just seeing it in the context of people playing it will always be completely different than just seeing it written down on a piece of paper. You like it's and like that's just like seeing the like main elements, like bugs are always such a massive thing with testing. Like if you don't test your event, you're going to have bugs, even if you think you've like read every single line of code 100 times and checked where all the barriers are placed. Like there's always going to be something you'll miss because like no one's perfect. No one's going to be able to see everything that could possibly be wrong.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so it's just doing that testing to ensure you get an actual here's how the game functions and that kind of perspective.
Yeah, exactly. Like just like seeing like again, being back to Pride games, the capture the flag game mode, we kind of copied from what it was originally made to have 10 people, and we modified it to have support for 24 people. So when playing it, I was like, oh well, this obviously doesn't work from how we originally played it. So we was slowly making adjustments like every test and just seeing what worked and what didn't work, and like finding like small bugs to fix and just overall improving the game experience. Because like again, until you've played the game in like its actual context, it's very hard to gauge how well something works. And even if it will be fun, like you can very much tell when you're testing something if this is something that people will have fun in, because if the testers aren't having fun, the creators probably all won't have fun.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's just about ensuring testing makes the experience happen that you want to have happen when you made the games. What do you do after the event? I'll add a slight caveat. Like obviously you're not running an event the same event multiple times, but you're still getting post-event feedback. So what do you kind of do with that? That's not giving you, they're going to say, change the game this way. Be like, we're never going to play that game again. So what do you kind of use that feedback to do?
I mean, it's just kind of useful to have, because even if you're never going to run that event again, it's possible it's likely you'll run that game mode again. Like, when I first ran the speedrun bingo game mode that I made for Pride Games 2022, I got a bunch of feedback for it. I was expecting it to run that exact game as Pride Games again, but then in February I ended up running it for a different event. So I was able to like look back at that feedback and see, oh well, this is what didn't work for this event, so I can implement it here. Even though it's just like feedback for like a survival games game mode. Like, it's no matter, like, you're having feedback on like how people found a game will always be useful, even if you're never going to play that exact thing again, because it gives you an idea. Because then you're not going to make the same mistake again and like make the same thing. Like, if you don't ask for feedback and you just but people didn't like something and you just continue on as normal, then it's kind of like there was kind of just like no point. I don't know. It's weird. Like, it's you could very easily just make an event and like just like change things as and when you wanted, but like getting feedback means that, like, people are going to like this more because you changed this thing that they said they didn't like.
Because then there's some buy-in from them where they feel like they're a part of creating this thing now.
Yeah, exactly. Like, if someone who like gave feedback on Pride Games and we then run that event again, they're going to come back and they're going to see like, oh well, they implemented this bit of feedback I suggested. Like, that's cool. That's what you should always try to do in events. Because if you're not like adapting like with like your player base, then you're going to start to lose the players. It's yeah.
Why do you think that is for the Minecraft event space, that there's this expectation of keep iterating it on all the time? Whereas, if you like play Hypixel mini games, like most of those games hadn't got updates for a long periods of time. So why is it that events are held to such a high standard, do you think?
Oh, that's a good question. I feel like events are held to a higher standard because I feel like minigames events are like, while quite similar, also very different. Like, when you're playing a minigame, I can, like, if I were to play Bed Wars right now, I could go play Bed Wars, or I could go do like 100 other things in the game of Bed Wars. There's so many different things you can do in that game mode. When you get to something like an event, like the event is the event. There's not really much you can do. Like when people are playing an event, they expect that event, that they're going to join that event and they're going to play in it as it was intended, and they're going to enjoy it. If you're playing a game of Bed Wars, you can adapt your playing experience that will make it enjoyable for you. If you want to play sweaty, you can. If you want to go like build a house, you can. In an event, like, it's kind of the expectation that I'm going to join this event, I'm going to join this game that's been made for me to play, and this is going to be what I'm going to do and enjoy. This is what my content is going to be. So I feel like if in terms of like iterating it, like again, like it's not the player's expectation that they're going to have to create the content out of the event that they're playing in. It's the expectation that the event is the content, and they're just kind of building off it.
Yeah, that's a great point right there. The event is the content rather than the players have to bring the content. Like, if they were making a video on Bed Wars, they'd be like, here's our idea to win this Bed Wars in a different way. Whereas instead they're going to come to an event and be like, I played in this event today. And that's the idea. And that's what the video is fully about.
And a lot of that is based off of the fact that that 99.9% of people playing Bed Wars are not content creators, right? It's a public game that most people just play for fun and are not recording or streaming themselves doing it. So Hypixel's job is not to make a game for content, it's to make a game that people find fun to play over and over again. So it's up to the content creators to figure out, how do we take this and make it into content, because it's not intended to be content. But if you're making a content creator event, you're intending it to be content.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. When you're making an event for content creators to play, you are making the content for them. So when you're making an event for a game for a minigame, you're making a game for people to play. That's the two very big differences. When you're making an event, you're making someone's content. Like, that is someone's going to make, and that's what they are joining to make their content. So I feel like the people who make events are kind of held to the same standards as like someone who makes content. People, like, when you're making an event, you need to think about everything a content creator have to think about if they were making a video. Like, how are you going to keep retention up? How are you going to make sure people like stay interested? How do you make sure you push like a specific message? The same way as if you were like making a YouTube video about something.
That makes sense. And that's also the case that obviously you're making an event for creators. You're kind of going about the end goal a little differently of like what it's for and how much of a spectacle it's supposed to be. And one of the things Gil and I have noticed that EVNT is really good at is at advertising their events and the lead up to it. So if you have any insight on, the strategies you use or what kind of things you focus on to ensure, there's the most hype for it there can be, what do you have in mind for that?
I've always kind of struggled with marketing for events because there's not like one key thing I could just say, do this and your event will do well, like in terms of marketing, because the events that do well will always be the events that have bigger creators in them. Like that's just a given. Like just off the bat, like that is like, if you're having an event that has a roster of bigger creators and you market it with that, it will do better. When you're running a small event, it's a lot harder to do. I'm quite lucky in that I've built up a following of people, like, or just on my Twitter. If I tweet about an event, I'll get like 100 or odd replies, people wanting to be in that event.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it is very hard to like market an event and get traction for it if it is not led by either big creators or like a big group, like Nox Crew, for example. Like that is always going to be a hard thing. But like you'll notice, like, if you keep doing it over and over again, it'll be a much slower process than just getting like 20 big creators playing your event. But you'll slowly notice it start to build up. Mm-hmm. But you will also notice that when events start putting bigger creators in them, they will start to succeed more in terms of how well known they are.
Yeah, you're right that a lot of it is trust in the like creator who worked, like whatever team or person worked on it. And that's when I remember a lot of the early MCCs watching it. A lot of times when a streamer is like explaining what it is, they're like, "Oh, it's this thing that the Nox Crew made," and the Nox Crew made like Terra Swoop Force and a bunch of other things. Like the fact that it was made by Nox Crew was part of why a lot of creators were like, "Oh, so this is going to be a good event." Like even early on, they were like, "Oh, this is going to be quality." Like they care about it. So if you're able to run, your own events for a while and build up a backlog, you can essentially point to that and see, like, see, I've done things before that are, good with smaller people. So then bigger creators whose time is essentially worth a bit more because they're trying to figure out where they should put their time to create content, they might actually be willing to play an event if they can trust it.
Well, I think it's also
exactly.
Also, thing we talked about Gilan on here is the events that came out after MCC started and how many just didn't work and how that led to like a less trust in events and people being like, I'm not willing to play in that one because I think the server is just going to break and then we can't actually get to play in it. So nowadays I think there's a little more trust in the Minecraft event scene again. People are willing to try out new things, and you have these like, I don't want to call them like the explorer creators, the ones who are willing to go play in something even if they have no idea what's about. Whereas then they bring in the creators after them who are a little more tentative about the things they'll play in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's definitely a big thing. But creators will be wary to playing something that they don't know, which is why for something like for MC Wipeout, for example, like we've brought in creators, or even something like Block Wars, I guess. Like we like have creators who because they are a creator with a large following will be trusted by other creators with large followings. So like if I am reached out to by like a big creator with like hundreds of thousands of followers who's like, hey, play in this event, I'll be trusting of it because of that. Or like if there's like a reputable brand behind it. But if it's just like, oh, this account has 50 followers and is like an MCC style event, like why am I going to play in it? Like I have no idea this is going to be good. I don't know anyone in the event. I don't know anyone working on it. Like it's very much a trust issue because like you said, like events just do break. Like people will join an event and then it just won't run. So you kind of like not only do you have to be careful making sure the event will run, you kind of have to be careful in the way you present it and make sure it's presented in a way that other people will want to join.
For sure. And that can obviously be very, very difficult to do depending on the scope of, the event somebody is making. If they want it to be a content creator event, you're going to have to kind of work your way up, essentially, of having people being willing to play in it. But you also then have to figure out, well, if I got all these creators playing the first one, but I want bigger creators in the second one, am I just kicking everyone out that played in the first one? Because that's not the best strategy to do that.
Yeah, there's a lot of those type of events, like these like MCC type events that do that sort of thing. Like they'll start off with like very small creator rosters, and then they'll slowly like suck in like a couple bigger people in, and then it just starts getting bigger and bigger, and just slowly notice that it just starts to become more of a bigger creator roster than small. And but kind of like, I think, obviously that's something that MCC never really had an issue with, because it was never like a smaller creator thing anyway. And then Block Wars and Block Wars Origins split, which worked well. But in a lot of these types of events, that is just what you see, which is why it's kind of nice, like for what I do, well, I don't really do event series. I just do one-off events. So like, and there's an event I'm running this Saturday. It's an event I've run before. It's not really a series, but there's bigger creators in this event than the last one, not because I can get these bigger creators in, and like not like other smaller creators in it. It's just because like these are just people that wanted to be in the event, and I'm very lucky where I can like kind of like be very flexible with who I invite to these kind of things, where it's like very open. Like but like, yeah, when you're running like an event like this, like that, like an MCC type event, you kind of like, you can't just bring in smaller creators as a crutch to make your event like actually be an event at the start of running it, to then just kind of leave them as soon as you've got bigger people to fill. Like it won't really be an issue for the bigger creators, but from like an overall point of view of your event, it's going to look quite bad.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's just the difference of scope of who your event's going to be for. And I think we're in an interesting position with Block Wars, because it's been the only event to kind of split, to essentially have, here are the players that started this community in the Block Wars Origins, they get to keep playing, and here's this content creator side with the goal of bringing like more attention toward Block Wars. And it'll be interesting to see if other events ever copy that style, but so far I have not seen anything else to suggest that.
I'm definitely expecting it. So it's it's just the Minecraft events in the same way of like SMPs. Like once one person does something and it does well, you'll see a lot of other people will immediately start to do the same thing. I very much expect to kind of see something like these other like smaller events start to do that split when they start to get bigger creators in. Like it's a solution.
We'll run into the issue of there's only so many weekends in a month. And once we hit so many events, what do we do?
I've seen that argument come up so many times, but it's like, it's really difficult because, if you put your event on a weekend, people are going to be available because people have to work, people have to go to school. Like weekends are the best time because then you can accommodate a large variety of time zones while everyone will be mostly free. But then you have people who are like, oh, well, I only work on weekends, so I can't do things on weekends and only weekdays. Like it's such a hard thing to balance. Like for Pride games, like I was like, well, I want one of the things at the weekend, so more people will be available. I don't want to just do it like a random Tuesday.
Yeah.
But I'm also I know, like we were quite lucky in that case where we have context, so I can know when MCC is going to be and like reach out to them. I can know when I'll reach out to Wolfie and know when Block Wars is going to be. And like know where all these other events are going to be. So we were able to kind of plan around it. But it's just one of those things where, like, especially like trying to accommodate for time zones, like,
yes,
I'm like, okay, well, if I put it in like what will be evening for Europe and America, then Australians are gonna, it's like just like 9 a.m. for Australian, they have to go to work that day, so it doesn't work for them because it's a Wednesday. Like, it's such a hard thing to balance, and it's one of those things where like you can never accommodate everyone, and you will often have things that clash. It's kind of like, if you don't think it's the clash, don't put it on a weekday. If you want to have the most amount of people available, put it on a weekend. There's really no good balance there because there's only 4 weekends in a month. So, and there's dozens of events trying to run across those 4 weekends.
I mean, I guess the solution is just have more creators that want to play in things and make sure like events have diverse rosters, so it's not the same, 70 players playing in every weekend events.
Yeah, I've seen that criticism a lot as well, where it's like, I see it like events just kind of like, when you're kind of doing the same kind of events over and over again, like you will just see the same people cropping up in each one, which then creates a problem where, well, these 5 creators have been in every other event, why still going to be in this one, but it's the same date as this one. Which is why like a lot of like the events I do, like the hide and seek event I'm running this weekend, it's very free for all. Like the player cap's 100, I invite like 130 because I know people won't show up, or people will have other events, people will have other commitments. Like it's one of those things where like there's no good balance because of the way the space is right now. Because everyone wants to play in everything, but everything always clashes.
Yes.
It's very hard to avoid.
Well, I think one other thing is that people do kind of rank the order of event. Like, if you were invited to be at an MCC and that compared to any other Minecraft event, you're probably going to choose the MCC, and I can't blame anyone for doing that because it's an amazing event that's made by a full-time team. Like, of course you want to be in an MCC; it's very special. But I think one thing in terms of like widening the the field of content creators, I know like Blockwars recently had like an all Spanish speaking team, which is like, I mean, I've talked to Joey about this, like, even though Minecraft seems to be dying when it comes to like the English speaking world, it definitely is not when it comes to the Spanish speaking world. Like there are tons of kind of like, if you go to Twitch and look up Minecraft, like half the time it's a bunch of Spanish speaking streamers playing, who are at the top. So it is just like there's a lot of untapped content creators, and if you're willing to change events with like, for Blockwars doing translation stuff, you can make it fun for other creators to be in it, and you can open up who can be in your event in other ways than just like finding smaller creators or finding different people who aren't into Minecraft or something like that.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, like reaching into communities that aren't really a part of this like inner event circle is definitely good, because it not only widens the amount of people you can invite, and widens like how people are going to see your creation, which is always something you want. Obviously, like it creates its own challenges, like having if you want to invite Spanish people to an event, it's kind of expected that the event will be in Spanish for them, or there'll be someone there who will know Spanish. So there's always going to be like it's a big hurdle to cross, but it's definitely one that it's very good to see it being crossed. I do agree that I think when you want to widen the amount of people you can invite to an event, reaching into other communities is better than just being like, oh well, let me just go on Twitter and just like find a bunch of random people that replied to my tweet, because you're not really broadening anything there. Like it's just the same thing as that you already have.
It's the same groups of people that reply to tweets about events, rather than like being intentional of reaching out to communities that have not previously been in things.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're getting toward the end, so I'll give you a good wrap-up question for you to convey your breadth of knowledge on us, which are, what are the main things people should know when they're making their own events? What are some of the common mistakes, or what are tips for like good team management?
I get asked this a lot by like a lot of people who want to make events. I've like given a variety of responses over like the last like year or so when I've been asked that. I think it very much comes down to like very few key things that you think would be quite obvious, but just don't happen in so many different events. Communication is obviously like, it's such a simple one, but it's such a big one. Like everyone needs to know what everyone is doing. Like if person A doesn't know what person B is doing, goes through the same thing, then you're gonna end up with wasted time, wasted money. You also just like making sure that everyone knows what they're working towards, that everyone knows this is the event that we want to create. Everyone's going into it with the same ideals. But just overall team communication is such a big thing, and it's such a thing I see like screwed over in so many different places. But I'm trying to think what else. There's testing events. That's always such a big one that I see so many people not do. You see so many events fail just because they don't test, and then the server like crashes when more than 10 people log on. testing, like that's a really big one. I don't think you necessarily need to have like a team of like super intelligent developers and like the best builders that cost thousands of dollars. I don't think you need to have like the best people to make a good event. I think you need to have passionate people. I think having people who are good at what they do is absolutely important. But like as long as you have people that are willing to learn and willing to adapt and take on feedback, that's what you need. Because again, taking on feedback, that's another really big thing. Take on feedback from events, learn from it. Actually, don't just like ask for it and then don't act on it. I like act on feedback. I make the event better every time, so it will continue to improve, and everyone on your team will continue to improve.
Yeah. So it's the main things about having passionate staff, communicating with everybody, and all being on the same page of, what you're trying to create.
Yeah. And just improving, like
and
constantly trying and wanting to improve.
Continue that process of learning and adapting and improving what you've created, because there's always room for improvement there. That sounds like things we've said before too to the audience.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's crazy how all the things to make a good Minecraft event are very true for making anything together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. I've done work in theater as well. It's like it's like the main thing I pursue outside of Minecraft, and it's so surprising like how many of the skills I pick up working in Minecraft events like translate to that. Like just the way you act in just any kind of team will always translate across to like any kind of thing. Like just all those soft skills, like being able to communicate, being passionate, being like on time with stuff. Like it's all a skill that like you wouldn't need to know in any kind of job or any kind of situation. Being able to do it in Minecraft won't necessarily like improve, like know how to make a Minecraft event won't make you be able to go and like become the president. But no, having those skills of how to work with other people and how to work well for yourself, like it's gonna help you in any situation.
Yeah. That makes sense. Well, this is where we'll wrap it up. Jake, thank you so much for a great interview. We look forward to seeing all the events you're going to be working on in the next year, including Block Wars. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.